Hi everyone, welcome back to the Power of a Hobby. I'm your host Don Fenton and it's great to be here. So today I've got a brand new guest and we have Sheryl Andrews, the listening detective. Hi Sheryl, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me here.
No problem at all. Why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit, tell people where you're from or even where you are at the moment, and then we can move on to the podcast.
So where I'm from is Gosport in Hampshire, UK, and where I am currently is in Menorca, Spain on holiday. So I couldn't resist this opportunity to have a chat to you while I was here. So I think what do I do is I'm a clean language facilitator. So I spend most of my time training people to listen to and trust themselves, get to know their own systems, get to know their own patterns, their own processes, so that they can develop strategies to work, learn and live at their best.
Love that. And we've actually done some work together before. I've actually done one of your courses, which is exceptional. And it's really big because we're obviously chatting off air. And for those listening and watching on YouTube, this podcast will be slightly different. But I'm really excited in how this is going to work. So, Sheryl, what does the power of a hobby mean to you?
For me, a power of a hobby is a mental break, a mental switch off. So particularly when I look at people who are working and living at their best, if your head is like for me, for example, I'm a natural talker, trained listener. So when I'm listening, I'm having to use a certain part of my brain and I'm really having to concentrate. So therefore a hobby is something that uses a different part of my brain. So like if I do physical exercise, I'm not having to use that kind of, it's not the memory recall side. It's usually quite repetitive. I quite often use a PT instructor because then she tells me what to do and I don't even have to think. There is no thinking going on. I'm just doing the action. But equally, sometimes a hobby for me is my crocheting, which actually means I'm learning something new. But most of what I do, I think if I think about hobbies, they involve a bit of learning. They learn something that's repetitive, so I don't have to do too much thinking. I like simple. And in my earliest hobbies, I've always involved physical exercise. And I've, that's now almost like it's as important as drinking water and breathing air. Having physical movement, I realise, is a really vital part of taking a mental break from a lot of the other stuff.
Yeah, and we're actually recording this only a couple of days after World Mental Health Awareness Day as well. So obviously, in terms of hobbies, they are there to support your own mental health. Let's talk about the early days for you, because we had quite a long chat off air anyway about this, and some of this for me is fascinating, which is why I said it's going to be slightly different. So talk to me about your early days and what you'd consider the hobbies were then.
Yeah, so I think now, and it was a conversation you and I had a few years ago about hobbies, and I'm thinking, for me, it was sports. So I swam competitively with a swimming squad, which meant training 6 till 8 in the morning before school and training again 4 till 6 every evening, and weekends used to have your galas. But I remember at one point becoming a competitive gymnast. So I was doing 4 till 6 swimming in the evening, and then I'd go and do 7 till 9 gymnastics. So I was doing 6 hours of training a day. So when I went through my GCSE levels, I had to choose. My mum said I had to choose which one. So I dropped the swimming and I just did gymnastics. On hindsight, if I really wanted to be good at something, I should have probably done the swimming. But that was, again, it was a hobby rather than, I don't think I was particularly good at any of them. I was an average performer, but I recognize now that who I am and how I learn and how I process, I actually hold a lot of emotion in my body. I hear and feel people's words. And I've realized that movement, especially swimming, where I can't hear everybody, the water's going shh.
Yeah.
It was a really good decompression time for me. So actually the swimming is what, on hindsight, I could look back and go, actually, that would have been the most resourceful thing for me to keep doing. So definitely back then it was, but because they were things I did every day. I did it routinely. But my mum was really good at doing lots of stuff. In school holidays, we did arts and craft, and we cooked and we baked and we painted and we made things. And she was a seamstress. She was a sewer machine. She's not a seamstress. She was a machinist. So she had a big industrial sewing machine at home. So I think I've always been around somebody who was, if you had to have a fancy dress outfit, we made it. So I've always had that creative role model in my life. But I would say my earliest one was really the thing that I did repetitively and consistently would have been sports and swimming and gymnastics initially.
Yeah.
But I was also part of the hockey team. I played tennis. Sometimes
What-
I'm thinking, when I listen now, I'm thinking, how the hell did I do all that? And I passed my exams.
I think also sometimes we just do them and we don't actually think about it. Actually,
No.
just with myself, it obviously was my rugby, and that was predominantly it. But as I say, in primary school, we were a small primary school. I did every sport.
Mm.
We traveled around playing chess. We did all these other things that people wouldn't have expected us to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, you end up going to secondary school and you continue some of them. And I dropped the chess, but again, it's always something that's been there. How important do you think? Because you said obviously with your mum being a machine, how important do you think parents are in terms of supporting children in and being a role model for having hobbies and things like this?
I think it is really important. And I remember a conversation years ago with my children. So my mum didn't, what was interesting, my mum was a bit like, I realised I repeated this pattern actually. She was good at encouraging us to do things. Actually, she did knitting, but I think she did it more out of a necessity. It was cheaper to make our clothes for us then, rather than it was just done for joy. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that we're forgetting now. I think in society now, it's often cheaper to buy things that are ready made than you make them yourself. But I think what we've lost in that transition of those generations, mum did it out of necessity rather than out of joy. But she was getting the joy and satisfaction that she had made something, she had created something. And I think whether you play a game and you learn a new skill, there is joy that comes into your system through that. I think the challenge I think I've had with some hobbies now is it feels like it's more money I'm spending, it's costing me more. And I've had to really re-educate myself to go, actually, this is not about saving money as it might have been for my mum. This is about the sense of satisfaction that I have created something, that I've made something. So I think it is important. And I think you can also be a role model, or you can be the encourager of it. So I think some parents, and I remember a conversation with my children that I was probably encouraging them to draw, and they were having this drawing session. And my son painted a picture, and he had a picture of him with his basketball because he played basketball. He had a picture of my daughter with her guitar because she played guitar. And then they had a picture of my husband with his bike because he went cycling. He went, "Oh, Mum, you don't have a hobby, do you?" Because there was nothing associated with me. And that was when I went, oh, I said, well, that's because my work's my hobby, because I set my business up to have something to do outside of running the home and the children. I said, that's what I do for fun because I love what I do.
Yeah.
And that actually also changed the relationship with my children about me going to work, because they stopped seeing it as, oh, mummy's working. Mummy's doing her hobby. She's doing what she really loves. So I think it's interesting that you can have what you might perceive as a traditional hobby like sports or crafting or whatever. But actually, there was a period of time in my life where my job, my business, being self-employed and setting up Step by Step Listening as a company back in 2008, that was my hobby.
Yeah, and
that was my leisure time away from kids. That was a way of getting my brain working, and I was learning about new stuff. I was doing courses all the time, and I'm still quite addicted to it now. Addicted, that sounds a bit, but
But maybe you are, but maybe there is that
I wouldn't
part
want to let
of you
it go.
that feels it.
Yeah, because it's a form of learning, and it's a form of engaging with aspects of myself and other people that I can't get anywhere else. And so I said to you off air, my husband retired, and I was considering retiring, and we did a 3-month sabbatical, and by the end of it, I went, hell no, I'm not retiring. Because actually, I realised having these conversations, these levels of conversations, is what, I'm a trained listener, natural talker, and I like to have these conversations. I like deep conversations. And so I won't get that anywhere else. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at now, is my physical fitness is part of my regime and my routine, and potentially could be called a hobby. But I think actually my business is still, right now, 15 years later, are we 14 years? I can't do the maths today. 14 years later is still a hobby, except I learn now to make sure it's a profitable hobby rather than just something.
Yeah, and you keep on learning, and there's always new things you can learn. And I do think it's an interesting part of the conversation, because actually, when and because of what I do and because of the podcast and everything else, I'm always caught up in conversation about hobbies, and the amount of people who actually go, but my business is my hobby, because obviously we deal with a lot of self-employed business owners, just the nature of networking and what we do. But it's really interesting the amount that actually still see that their business are their hobbies.
Mm.
And I
But
think
I have learned I need to take time out from that, because I think it's a mindset thing. When I was modeling and we were thinking about retiring, I've got really clear about retirement would be what it would be like for me, what it would feel like. And there was lots of pressure being taken off of me to earn a certain amount so we have our pensions, and I could retire financially if I wanted to. But also a business, I have a team that I pay. So my business costs me £1,000 a month. So I can't not earn any income. I have to be able to pay my staff, my team, and I need to be able to pay myself something if I'm going to put X amount of hours into the business. So from that point of view, it's a business as well. It has to make money. But I've realized that I did also need, like my husband, the minute he retired, he was like, oh, I can't wait to go. He went on a 6-day cycling holiday. He went fishing. He's looking up this. He was like, he had these hobbies that he'd had since he was a kid that he just couldn't wait to get out and do more of. Whereas when I was given the space and time, I was like, I don't know what to do with myself. And so I have taken up things like crocheting and gone back to some of the things that I loved as a child, which was my watercolor painting. But I have also recognized there are some things I'd like to go and do courses for, which will cost money. So therefore, actually, if I work in the business, which is also a hobby, something I love doing, and I find it actually, it doesn't use the part of the brain that makes me feel like I'm tired and exhausted from work. It's actually something that energizes me, and it is like a leisure thing. But I still need to rest that part of the brain and do something else. So the crocheting and the watercolors are the thing that I'm focusing on at the moment. Crocheting generally during the winter, because the blankets get very hot and heavy when I'm carrying them on my lap. And Mark said to me, you're going to bring your crochet with me? I went, not to Spain, no. My hands will be too hot and sticky. But the watercolor is something I tend to do during the summer months, and then the crochet is what I'm doing through the winter months. Because I think it's important that we have something that uses a different part of our brain. And I spend a lot of time with people in my work. So actually a lot of my hobbies right now are quite introverted, and I can just do them quietly on my own. I do use YouTube as a teacher. But what I did recognize, if I retired and didn't have the people interaction, then I'd want to go on courses about painting, and I want to go on courses and I want to go meet people who are also crocheting or quilting or making things. So I think it's an interesting part for me, because I think I probably had about 10 years when I had a slipped disc and I was told I couldn't exercise, where I didn't really have any hobbies. And that's probably when I had depression, postnatal depression. I'd also gained a lot of weight. I mean, I was my pregnancies, etc. And it's only now when you look back on it, you go, yeah, it's because I was working and I was looking after my family, but there was never a break. I didn't do anything else that was just for me, or that gave my brain a break from anything else. I literally was working 12 hours a day as in the bank. I came home and looked after my little girl, went to bed, got up, fed her, went to work. And I did that for about 5 years. And I think that's because I also stopped all my sport when I left school. A lot of the gym clubs and that stuff, I didn't do them when I went to sixth form, from 16 to 18. I was still part of the hockey team. I played for Fareham. But when I left school, I moved areas and I got a job that's residential. So all of that stopped like overnight. So I think I'm also aware that it's really easy to get out of the habit of it without realizing you've done it. You can accidentally stop things. You have to remind yourself to do them again.
And I think as well, it's amazing when you talk to people about different things that they're doing, and actually a lot of it is when they almost feel when they become parents or they become in a relationship or all these other things that come up, they have to stop certain activities. Oh, I'm a parent. Why? I haven't got time for a hobby. I'm a parent. And actually, you almost, personally, I think actually it's almost the most important time to be continuing with them, because actually all the time, for me, my whole identity has been as a rugby player. As sort of been involved in rugby as a coach or a player or just someone who people know through sport and what I do. But actually, as soon as that stops, your identity starts changing, or as soon as you become a parent, or you're with a new partner, or actually you're their partner. You're not the rugby player, or you're not the swimmer, or you're not the gymnast. Actually, I feel that's almost as an important time to keep your hobbies.
Yeah.
You know, and you talk to parents, they go, "Oh, I haven't got time because I'm a parent now." Yeah, but surely you want to be showing your children actually you can be doing other stuff, and you are. I'm not. So I suppose it's the same as, you know, obviously I've got 12 and 11-year-old daughters, but I'm assuming when they get older and all of a sudden your children don't need you as much, all of a sudden your identity changes, because actually all you've been known as is a dad or a mum and actually, so you're there going, well, actually they don't need me now.
Yeah, well, and actually I think that's the other thing. I think we get as a parent, I will say to you though, I think I didn't need to do necessarily hobbies per se away from my kids, because I did them with them. We did a lot of gluing and sticking, and we did a lot of colouring, and we did a lot of baking and creating and making things. But my youngest, we've got a blended family of 5 children. Our youngest is 25 now. So it's probably about 9 years ago, not long after I set up the business, that they get to that age where they're no longer doing stuff with you. They want to do things on your own.
Yeah.
And it was only probably about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, maybe, and definitely during lockdown, I said to my husband, I said, I realised I really like doing crafting, but because I haven't got the children to do it for, and also maybe justifying the cost of it was for the kids, it was beneficial. What I realised, the biggest problem wasn't to do with hobbies. It was actually learning to be okay to do stuff for myself.
Yeah.
Spend money on myself and do stuff, which is probably where the training and that became, I was paying for this training. My training was expensive to train as a clean language facilitator, and I did it a number of times, and I still attend training today. So by making it into a business, I paid for my training. But I have noticed a mindset thing that I noticed when one of the blankets was if I bought the wool that was on the pattern, it was like £300 to make this blanket. So I've gone and bought the wool from Poundland and done it in a different version to make it cheaper. So I think there's a mindset thing when it comes to hobbies, and particularly parents. I think one, it's about investing money on yourself and also the time it takes. But I remember a lady I met 10 years ago, and she said about the importance of reading, and I like reading. And she said, no matter how busy I get, I always read a paragraph before I go to bed every night. And that made me, that sort of mental attitude about hobbies, if reading was your hobby or your interest, I've realized that, even if I did 1 row of crochet every day, even if I painted 1 painting per month, I'm still having a hobby. I'm doing it regularly, maybe not as often as you think. And I think redefining for yourself, what do you want to do, how often, and finding ways to do it. Because when you are a parent, you do have extra expenditure, you do have extra time spent, and you're probably knackered if you've got sleepless nights. It's very hard to be able to do all of those things.
Yeah.
But keeping something for yourself, I think is important. How much of that's a role model, I don't know, because I would imagine most of my time would have been done when they were asleep. They probably wouldn't even know that I've done it, because I don't think I could have done. I struggled to even get babysitters to go out. I had babysitters to go to work. So I wonder how much of that's a mindset thing, that it's about, it's okay for me to do something and leave the children. I know that my mum didn't leave us very often.
Yeah.
So I've modelled that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's always these things that come up in conversations that you have with different people. So in terms of obviously where you're at now, you're doing your crocheting, and you're doing your sort of watercolors and that side. What else do you want to be doing? I know we mentioned a little bit that you want to learn some new things, and we touched off air about it.
I think the interesting thing for me is, it's like I used to sew and make clothes. But again, I stopped doing that because when you've got little children, you don't want pins all over the floor. And the house wasn't big enough. I had grandma living in one room. I had 2 children, and then we had the other children staying with us. There was never a space where you could leave so it wasn't something I could do in a day, and I had to leave things out. So I think what I see happening in the future, particularly as I change the working hours and my patterns and my relationship with my business, is creating more time to sew. That's one thing I want to be able to do, is create clothes, and I want to learn how to do that. And that requires going on courses and finding out. But I've noticed over the last few months, I've started Googling the crafting and sewing clubs that are near me, and I'm trying to find ways to get out and meet people. So For me, definitely it's the sewing and the creating and keeping it. It's really important for me. That is just something I do for pleasure. It's not something I'm going to try and turn into a business, because that uses a different part of my brain. I continue to do the work I do. I love listening, I love coaching, and I love supporting other people to work out what they want and advocate for their own needs. But I think there's also the book writing. That's another thing that that's almost a hobby to some extent. Book mentor, I'm on holiday with her at the moment, but there is a business side to it, and it's a marketing tool. But actually, I get it that uses a different part of my brain to sit and write things. So I think for me, it's the crafting, it's the making things. It's also cooking, I've realized, is a big thing for me. When my son took up catering that's what he decided he wanted to do for a living. He took over the cooking for about 2 years. And I actually became quite unwell. And I realized it's because I get quite a lot of joy from the chopping and the preparing and the color of food. So I think for me, all I can say to you in the short answer is it's got lots of color involved. So it's either food or clothes or fabric or wool and my paints. It's color and it's creating. And it doesn't really matter to me. It's not the same thing all the time. But as long as every day has got some color involved and I've created something, then it feeds my soul. And that's where I feel more at peace within myself and to do the other things that challenge me a lot more.
Well, love that. So, final question. This has gone really quickly. It's gone really quickly. Final question. So, if you met somebody who said they haven't got a hobby and decided they wanted to have a hobby but would have no idea where to start, what would you say to them?
I guess that the first thing is to really check in and remind yourself why you want it. Because if you don't know where to start, you're going to have to push through some discomfort of going from the confident, familiar, I know what I'm doing, to something unfamiliar. And you have to know why you're going to do that, to be motivated, to push yourself through the discomfort of not knowing. Because I think one of the greatest gifts of hobbies, and I think this applies to everything we've talked about from my gymnastics. So you start with something, you want to learn butterfly, or you want to do a gymnastic move, or you want to do crochet, it doesn't matter what it is. You start as not knowing, you know, you want to try and do this, but you have to have several attempts of failing and making mistakes. And actually, you've got to be able to enjoy that journey of learning. So I think the first thing I would say is check in with yourself. Why do you want to do it? You know, it could be that Dominic's just suggested you should have one, and actually just check that you do really want one yourself, because it's very easy in life to do it just because someone else has told you ought to.
Yeah, completely
so
agree.
Decide, why is it important to you? What's the impact? If you don't have a hobby, what's the consequences? If you do have a hobby, what's the impact? What's the consequences of doing that? Get really clear why you want it. And then I think, in my experience with people, it'll come down to whatever story you tell you about time or money. Because if you really want a hobby, like I said about my blankets, I worked out I made one for £12 instead of £300 by buying cheaper wool. I still get the joy. I still get to make it. I've also asked loads of family and friends if they've got any wool they don't want, can I have it? Because there's loads of people that have got it in their cupboard that are not using it. So I've found cheaper ways of doing it. So if you work out why you can't do it, I think that's also important, that there are cheaper ways. And if you haven't got much time, decide how much time you're going to give yourself to do it. So I think, get clarity why you want it. Think about how much time you want to spend and how much money you can spend on it. And then really find a way of reconnecting with that inner child. You know, that child that when they fell over because they really wanted to walk, they just try again and fall. But if you haven't got that, you need a parent normally around you then to encourage you. Don't you? Come on, you're doing it. Come on, you're great. Well, so basically get a support network around you of people who will encourage you to do it. So I think it's really easy to do things on YouTube. I've learned a lot of my crochet on YouTube, but I'm also part of loads of Facebook groups now, and loads of other people put in and go, my square's gone like that. Why? And then an expert comes along and says, well, you've lost. I look at it and think, I have no idea why you've done that. But I listen to them being corrected by other people and saying, well, you've lost a stitch here, or you've gained a stitch there. And I'm like, really? But be part of a group of people that are learning. so that you don't feel like you're on your own. And there's loads of people. There's like Facebook's got lots of groups for hobbies that I'm aware of, the ones that I've chosen to do. But you can go to physical groups locally. I know there's some crochet groups in my area that I could go to. So yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying is I have a 3-step process in my head whenever I'm doing things. It's like get clarity of what I want and why. Think about what's going to give me confidence. So in this case for me, it's usually about time and money and having the confidence in myself to learn things. And actually, if it's going to put me through a change cycle, it's going to be uncomfortable. Make sure I've got the network and the support around me. Be okay with asking for help. That's mine.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Sheryl, thank you so much for your time, especially on holiday as well. I was blown away by it when you told me that. So if people want to find out more about you, where can they see your websites or Facebook, where can they get in contact?
So the company's called Step by Step Listening, and it's stepbysteplistening.com. And you can find me, Sheryl, as an Sheryl, at stepbysteplistening.com. I've got a Facebook page, also called stepbysteplistening.com. No, it's not .com. It's Facebook called Step by Step Listening. I don't really do any of those. I think I'm automatically connected to Instagram. So if you put me there, I probably won't ever get the message. And I am on Twitter, but I think it's called X now, and I don't do anything on there really. So if you really want to get hold of me, Facebook, email, or LinkedIn, and you Sheryl Andrews on LinkedIn. And I do have a business page on LinkedIn as well. But the most place I spend most of my time nowadays is LinkedIn. Right. But you can find me there or my website.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in or listening to the podcast. And I'm Don Fenton, your host, and I will see you again soon. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.